Hello and welcome back to Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anushka Mutanda-Dowty. The flights are booked and we are prepped and ready to head out to New York for the start of this trial, where we're going to be in court making sure you have those updates straight away. So make sure you subscribe so you never miss a thing. Reminder, Diddy has been accused of sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution and racketeering with conspiracy. He denies all the allegations. Today, Beyonce, LeBron James, Gloria Estefan are all named in a new lawsuit. Now, you might have seen this all over your timeline and thought they were accused of something. Actually, they're listed as witnesses, and that's something we're going to get into. We're also going to take a look at Victim 1's decision to go public. Now, you might have thought this period before the trial was going to be the calm before the storm. I did. Wrong. On April 3rd, the government released another superseding indictment. That's the third one we've had now, but this time it adds on 2 additional criminal counts against Diddy. Now, we're just over a month from opening statements. Why file it now? Does it leave the defense enough time to prepare? Luckily, we have our dream team here to answer those questions. Joining me today is our resident criminal defense attorney, Sean Kent. Hi, Sean.
Hey, how are you doing? How's everybody?
And Rolling Stone's senior investigative reporter, Cheyenne Roundtree. Hi, Cheyenne.
Hi, how are you?
So a bit of a reminder, we haven't had a superseding indictment for a while. Indictments, as Sean tells us, are just criminal lawsuits, a story or a list of accusations made by the government, in this case against Diddy. A superseding indictment replaces the original indictment. It usually includes extra charges, new counts, or additional co-defendants. It can also take stuff away, I believe, but that's not what we're dealing with here in this case. Cheyenne, what are the big differences in this new superseding indictment?
So the biggest difference is now the inclusion of victim 2 with its own count of sex trafficking. So before, we've heard about victim 2, victim 3, but they were kind of put under the racketeering count 1 charge. Now this victim 2 has its own separate count of alleged sex trafficking and the Mann Act, which is transportation to engage in prostitution. That's kind of the big thing here.
So this was something I found confusing. We've seen these allegations before related to victim 2. Why is it that they now, in effect, have their own paragraph, Sean?
And this is where I start law dorking out, because I think this is fascinating analysis is what's ended up happening. Since day one, I have said that neither side is ready to go to trial. Because there's terabytes of information, but both of them are playing a game of chicken. Nobody wants to be the one that says they're not ready. And when this ends up happening, you find out stuff over and over and over again. You remember at the beginning when we first talked, I said, get ready for a slew of superseding indictments. There's 3 possibilities. Possibility 1, that the government is trying to figure out a creative way to get other information in. Possibility 2 is also they have been interviewing and sat down and met with victim 2 and said, man, she's really credible. This is some great information. We want this stuff directly in front of the jury. And then there's possibility 3. We're not ready. Let's not bluff, but let's put some other information out there so the defense is the one who is asking for the continuance. And if you read the defense's motions, they're all but saying, how can you get ready for all of this? How can you be prepared for all of this? They're giving us this information on the eve of trial. I think in their language, they flat out say, this ain't fair. And we've been preparing for this stuff since you gave us that enterprise letter back in February. And now on the eve of trial, you're giving me this stuff now. How can we get ready? And maybe the government's not ready. And they're like, your turn to tell everybody you're not ready and it's not us. You can see I'm getting a little excited. I'm sorry, I'm a law dork. And it's a fascinating chess match that is happening right now.
I would also say that victim 2, I believe when we first heard about victim 2 was at his arraignment back in September, and Diddy's own lawyers said, because this is the alleged victim that said, reading Cassie's lawsuit is like reading my own sexual trauma. Diddy's team said, hey, the prosecutors have never even spoken with victim 2 to our knowledge, and they didn't believe her to be a victim. So maybe she didn't even talk to prosecutors until well into this process. So who really knows exactly the timeline of things, but that also could be a reason why now that they're saying she's willing to testify and maybe she wasn't speaking at the time when this came down in September.
Because, you know, it's easy to think the grand jury met, concluded, and then we got the first indictment, but they can reconvene, they can reopen investigations, right?
They're probably still investigating. No one says the grand jury is done necessarily. This is just them going forward. And that's why I've always said, I thought many more superseding indictments are going to be coming forward. You just don't know.
They termed it a substantive count of sex trafficking and transportation for prostitution. Does that mean victim 2 could now spend more time up on the stand giving evidence, or there'll be more scrutiny over what they're saying because they have their own couple of paragraphs?
The best way to describe it, the simplest way, is victim two before was a bit player in this movie. Now victim two has their own spinoff, and they're talking specifically about victim two now. And so she's got her own series. So it ain't just going to be that she's going to be on the stand. Now they're going to have to, because before she would just testify about her story and get off the stand. Well, now they've got to substantiate, they've got to prove her story, they've got to corroborate her story, they got to bring other witnesses about her story. So hers is its own trial. So yes, that's going to, remember that whole 2-week trial? I hope you've got your hotel set for a little bit longer, because that by it, this count just added to the trial.
Cheyenne, there were other differences with victim two's addition.
Well, with victim one, we know that their experience with Diddy lasted from 2009 to 2018. And Diddy's own attorneys at his arraignment said he's different, he's changed, he's, not this person. He described this relationship with victim one as, toxic, loving. Now this victim two having a more current timeline of events with Diddy charged with the same acts as victim one, they can't still use that rhetoric because 2018, 2021 to 2024, that is not enough time to say that was in the past.
People have been asking on social media, does that mean that he was allegedly doing this alleged crimes up until the moment that he was arrested?
I mean, I spoke with a alleged victim that she said that he was asking her to come to New York the day before he was arrested. So by my own reporting when speaking with people, this alleged pattern of, sexual encounters with women was continuing up until his arrest.
We should say, obviously, Diddy disputes that. But in terms of the defense preparing a new way to go at this, their statement that they've put out are, these are not new allegations or new accusers. This is what they said to CBS News, the BBC's US partner. These are the same individuals, former long-term girlfriends who were involved in consensual relationships. This was their private sex life defined by consent, not coercion. So once again, we're just going to have a trial of what did they consent to, what didn't they consent to, and trying to prove coercion on the stand, right?
100%. The thing that's interesting is if you read the indictment, they specifically reference US Code 1591E2, which is the definition of coercion. And when you talk about coercion, it says two things. One, coercion is you choke the hell out of somebody and says, I'm making you do it. The other coercion is the much more subtle, the mental coercion. But there's a possibility that both sides could be telling the truth in a weird, unique situation. That in Diddy's mind, I wasn't coercing anybody. This is how my relationships are. She enjoyed this rough relationship, if you will, and enjoyed the benefits of the relationship. She enjoyed the things she was getting because maybe that's the way I was raised, that's the relationship I have, and she never complained about it. That's what I thought. She could be saying, I never told him that, but in my mind, I knew if I didn't do these things, he would cut me off. I'd be out of the relationship. I'd be gone from the relationship. So in a weird way, they both could be telling the truth. The difference is Diddy's way is still against the law.
We've had some other interesting filings relating to the victims, but something was new about victim one. Cheyenne, what's been the update on what victim one has now decided to do?
Victim one has said that she will come forward with her name and she plans to testify under her name. The other victims, victim 2, 3, 4, have requested to remain anonymous because of the high profile, the sensitive nature of these allegations. But the government has said victim 1 is ready to testify with her full legal name.
And when the government officially names that person, we will report it as so. We've said before, the testimony of victim 1 or the allegations from victim 1 closely align with those made by Cassie Ventura, the longtime romantic partner of Diddy. Just in terms of what that looks like in a court, Cheyenne, for somebody who's never sat in criminal proceedings or in a court, what does that mean for victim 1?
It means that, they will use her name on the stand, that she will be introduced as that. We might even see her walk into court. She might not use the back door that they sometimes use for people that are trying to protect their identity. The sketch artists that are there, because we don't have cameras in this federal court, the sketch artist can draw her. and the press will be able to report and say who this person is. So it's a full on, the same way that we're talking about Diddy in court, we will be able to talk about victim one.
And they've said they both agreed to not use Rule 412, the previous sexual history, which I said last episode I was relieved about, because it means you get less of that kind of, we're going to talk about your whole personal life outside of, you know, the limits of the date range that we speak about here. But if victim one is choosing to go use their name, walk into court, the press have made no such, you know, promise. And they can go through and bring up people's past and dig things out, as we have seen, particularly like tabloid journalism there. We've seen this happen a million times before. So that's an even bigger consideration for somebody choosing to use their real name and identity.
100%. I have a problem with it from both perspectives. As a prosecutor, as a former prosecutor, the reason you either want everybody wanting to use pseudonyms or nobody, because if I'm on a juror, I'm just like, well, wait a minute, why do we have this person's real name and not these three? Focus on the witness when they take the stand, the psychology of nobody knows what I'm saying, nobody knows me. I'm much more free and relaxed to say everything I possibly want to say. When you've got that blank face in front of you and nobody knows who you are, you feel a little more free. A lot of times that's when we have minor victims, we're like, we don't want anyone to see your face, so you're more comfortable testifying. From the defense standpoint, I don't want you comfortable. You're on this stand accusing somebody of a crime that could have them spend the rest of their life in prison. I don't want you comfortable on the stand. I don't want you feeling that you can say whatever you want without repercussions. I want the opposite. So it's from, I mean, not necessarily from the jury standpoint, it's from Diddy's standpoint and the cross-examination. You want that fidgeting. You want that uncomfortable. You want the person looking around. You don't want them comfortable, because if they're comfortable, they testify more comfortable. They testify more believable. And the jury's like, oh, I believed her. I felt bad for her. And two, going back the other way, when they're protected in their name and identity, it almost shows the jury that we're protecting that person, meaning we believe what they said before they ever got on the stand. Because why would you protect somebody's identity if you don't believe them?
But it says, okay, the defense can argue against this, right? The defense must, quote, demonstrate a particularized need for disclosure, which the court weighs against the risk to the witness. What reason can you come up for saying we need to know the place you're employed, your address, names of your family members, identifying details as the defense?
What they would have to come up with is they'd have to come up with some past background fact goes specifically to the defense. Where you worked is specific for the jury to know. What your name is, if you were tied into another witness, you know, something that it has to be so specific, and it's just not there. So what I just gave you is the argument that's going to be made and the argument that's going to be shut down, because it's the argument that's always made. And it's always shut down.
And there are some other things, some other interesting findings as well that have come quite recently about, here we are again with 404B evidence and Rule 413, and it sounds confusing, but we know this is bringing up previous bad acts, or now it seems alleged bad conduct. Here, because his lawyers have just filed this saying, quote, after months of refusing to disclose identity of alleged victims, and just 60 days before trial, the government suddenly announced that it intended to shore up its case with evidence of uncharged and uncorroborated crimes, including purported instances of sexual assault, all but one of which supposedly occurred decades ago. These incendiary allegations are substantially more serious than the charged offences, and if admitted, would make it impossible for Mr. Combs to receive a fair trial.
You'll hear it a lot as it gets closer to the trial. You hear the judge has got to do a probative versus prejudicial balancing test, and it literally is a balancing test. And what he's trying to figure out is probative, meaning does the jury need to have it to reach a decision, versus how prejudicial that information could be. So it might be necessary, because everything's necessary, because you want to show every part of who Sean Combs is, every part, because it's a trial. But showing some of his stuff is so prejudiced, the jury will not be able to unhear it. And that's what the defense is saying. Their argument is going to be, he's just not a good person. That's it. That's literally, whether we want to believe it or not, that is the prosecution's case in a nutshell. And how much do we get to, he's a bad, he cheated on his third grade math test? Does that might be probative because he's a cheater. But how prejudicial is that to bring something up like that? And the judge is like, well, that's not that big of a deal. Well, if the allegations are that he sexually assaulted a girl in the 5th grade, man, that could be probative, but that's so prejudicial because it has nothing to do with these charges. And that's what the defense is saying. The defense is saying he's not charged with sexual assault. Why are you bringing all this sexual assault information?
And logistically, this is a bit of a nightmare as well. Cheyenne, can you just remind us what time frame they've put on this trial?
I mean, they said that they needed 6 weeks, I believe, for their side to present their case, or 3 weeks at one point. Now it's doubled to 6, and then the defense maybe 2 weeks. But they were trying to put up a buffer up until July 4th. This seems it's going to go past that for sure.
Well, because the filing goes on to say about this, the one I was just reading from a minute ago, goes on to say, quote, these are entirely new, untested, uncorroborated and uninvestigated allegations. Okay, all but one of the alleged incidents happened over 20 years ago, with the oldest dating to the 1980s. The allegations implicate dozens of unidentified witnesses and alleged co-conspirators around the world, and some of the key witnesses to the supposed incidents are dead. Collectively, these new allegations require many months, if not years, to investigate, and if admitted, would require a series of mini-trials, certain to double the length of a trial the government originally said would last 3 weeks. That doesn't sound like 8 weeks to me.
I don't think the court's going to let them to get into all of this information. I just think they will. And that's kind of what the defense is doing. The little sly thing the defense is saying is like, hey, judge, you let this in, we going to be here a while. And judges are people too. Just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. A lot of judges will say that. Why do you need it? There's a difference between wanting it and needing it. And if they're allowed to spend 6 of these 8 weeks, notice I said 8 weeks, 6 of these 8 weeks talking about how awful of a human being Mr. Combs is and all the awful stuff that he has done, at some point in time when the jury starts hearing the other information, it's like, I don't care if he did this, but he's done so much other stuff, it's time for him to go.
And I mean, just a reminder that the 5th of May, we've got juries, we've got a jury selection, we've got peremptory strikes on the 9th of May, and then opening statements on the 12th of May. Like you said, this game of chicken is, I mean, it's back and forth filings almost daily now.
What any other defense attorney, I promise you, would have asked for a continuance. I think Combs is running the train. Is like, I don't want a continuance. I want to go forward. I'm tired of being in jail. Let's do this. Any other defense attorney would have asked for a continuance. And the government, I promise you, would have consented to it. They're like, okay. It's wild that we're this quick.
He's been in that jail, the Metropolitan Detention Center, since September 2024. We're going to keep you up to date with what's going on with this federal case. We're keeping an eye on it, and we'll have Sean and Cheyenne here to explain. Now it's time for Elsewhere in the Diddyverse, and it's hard not to talk about this headline-making lawsuit that was filed in Florida. Cheyenne, can you just talk me through, just briefly, who was involved in this or whose names were attached to this case?
It's who wasn't almost named in this case. You had LeBron James, you had Gloria Estefan, you had Christian Combs, his son, a birthday party for his son. You had Jay-Z and Beyonce, you have Diddy, you have another alleged victim who claims that she was sex trafficked by Diddy named in this. So it's a who's who of who might have been in South Beach, Florida in 2015.
But the way this was covered by big publications, small publications, they led with Beyonce, Jay-Z, LeBron James, which I understand because you're going to get clicks, hits and views. But it made it seem like they were named as defendants in this civil case when they're not. His name is Joseph Manzaro, says that they were witnesses to some stuff that happened to him. Now, this lawsuit lists Diddy, Brendan Paul, Emilio Estefan, Adria English, and Eric Mejas as co-defendants. The plaintiff, Joseph Manzaro, alleges he was drugged and taken to the Estefan mansion, where he was then transported to Diddy's mansion, where the plaintiff believes Diddy's son, Christian Combs, was celebrating his birthday. Once there, he claims he was degraded, sexually assaulted, and sexually maimed. Although the claim doesn't identify who allegedly sexually assaulted Manzaro, it claims that the abuse was directed by Diddy and English. It alleges the other defendants, along with Diddy and English, contributed by trafficking him, facilitating the abuse, and were involved in attempting to cover up what Manzaro alleges happened. So what have Diddy's team told us about this lawsuit? They said, this complaint demonstrates the depraved lengths plaintiffs will travel to garner headlines in pursuit of a payday. No sane person reading this complaint could credit this story. Mr. Combs looks forward to having his day in court, where these lies and the perverse motives of those who told them will be revealed. Now, like you mentioned, Cheyenne, Adria English, who also has a lawsuit accusing Diddy of sexual assault, I reached out to Adria English as well, and she hasn't yet responded. Brendan Paul is named as a defendant, and his lawyer says if someone seriously filed this lawsuit, the allegations against Brendan are 100% false and literally impossible to have occurred. And so far, we haven't been able to reach Eric Mayers for comment. Just a warning, this lawsuit contains sexually explicit content. When it comes to Beyonce, Joseph Manzaro claims she saw him in a drugged state, and she exclaimed, "What's this? What's this all about? Why is this half-naked man with a cock mask standing here in front of me?" To which another defendant responded, Diddy wants to show him what happens to snitches. He says Gloria Estefans saw him in the mansion in a drug state and repeatedly asked for an ambulance to be called. He says that Jay-Z was next to Beyonce when she saw Joseph. He also says that LeBron James, who was wearing a bath towel and brown shower shoes at the time, saw him in a drug state. But they're not actually listed as co-defendants. Now, in a statement to the BBC, Jay-Z's lawyer said he wasn't in Florida at the time. He was engaged in an easily findable public activity that proves he was not at this event. This is more nonsense that erodes the trust in our justice system. Now, it says in the lawsuit that Joseph believed it to be Christian Combs' birthday. His birthday is on the 1st of April, so 1st of April 2015. Jay-Z was in New York launching Tidal, if we remember, his streaming service. It was a big event. He was there with Beyonce, Rihanna, I think Daft Punk was there, and they all sort of signed on to be co-owners of Tidal. Beyonce's rep hasn't yet commented, but there are pictures of her with Jay-Z at their early April Tidal streaming launch. Now, it doesn't specifically say that this party actually took place on the 1st of April in the lawsuit. LeBron James's camp have also firmly denied he was there, and they said that he was busy playing in the NBA playoffs with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Emilio Estefan strongly denies the allegations and has issued a joint statement with his wife Gloria Estefan, who's named as a witness, saying the property in question was never a home where Gloria and Emilio resided, but it was rather a house they owned for a family use. There were no parties thrown there between 2012 and 2019, and they have the necessary documents to support these facts. This lawsuit says that they've witnessed something that is potentially criminal and they haven't done anything, called the police or tried to help the plaintiff. Why are they just in the lawsuit named as witnesses?
And that's a lot to unpack. One, a lot of states don't have a quote unquote Good Samaritan law, which requires you to report a crime. There's no duty. I mean, as much as we say we want you to report and do something about a crime, there's nothing to say that you don't have to just walk away when you see a crime has occurred. Naming these specific witnesses is for one reason and one reason only: sensationalism. And it's kind of disgusting, because if you read lawsuits, you don't mention witnesses. You say a witness. I mean, it's very easy just to mention a witness saw blank, a witness saw blank. So putting these names out there is for one reason alone. It's for sensationalism. And similarly, as we have said, you don't use specifics when giving statements. Public reading it just like that belies common sense. And sometimes you just have to be careful. There's just so many problems. And that's one of the things I hate about the U.S. justice system. Anyone can bring a lawsuit, and there's no rules on how you write your lawsuit. You know, I can write a lawsuit however I want right now and mention specifics in it, and it's going to get looks and get clicks when I file it publicly.
The reaction to this online has been that it's been picked up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think since Diddy was first accused by Cassie, everyone has been pointing the finger about who else might be implicated, who else might be, going down with him. And so any notion of another high-profile person maybe being a witness to anything is going to get media attention. And that's exactly what happened here.
And look, we'll keep our eye on these civil cases and these federal filings. Our eyes are firmly on the Diddyverse, which seems to be ever expanding at the moment. And we have with us, through this all, holding our hands, Sean and Cheyenne. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming and explaining this. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much for having me. Much appreciated.
And thank you, Cheyenne.
Yeah, of course.
That's it for this episode of Diddy on Trial with me, Anushka Matanda-Doughty, for the BBC World Service YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a thing, and keep sending us those questions on WhatsApp. You can get us at +44 330 123 551. That's +44 330 123 551.